Hello there, hi. My name's Sophia Leadill. I'm an artist educator based in North Wales, and I thought it would be really nice to show you how to do a printmaking and embroidery activity today. And the good news about this activity is that we'll be using household objects and things that can be easily found around the home, or that you can borrow from somebody, or there are a few things that you might want to go out and buy or buy, buy over the internet. But most of the things are really easy to get hold of. So the activity that I'm going to show you today is an activity that I first developed a couple of years ago when I was doing some work for a larger project, and it came out of me just having a play around really with household materials, how I could use them to mark make, so to make marks, and how I could use them to create depth really and texture. So that's where this activity came from, and I did actually deliver a workshop with a friend of mine who's also an artist, where we used lots of household objects to do this. So it's kind of tried and tested, but we'll also be leaving room for some experimentation, I guess, because that's often where the fun is. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly scan around the table so that you can see what materials I've got here to give you an idea of what you may need yourself to do this activity. Okay, so I'll just scan over here first. So we have got some white fabric that's just been cut out. So that could be an old sheet. It could be a piece of fabric that's left over from something. So just some plain white cotton. I'll go back over this way. You can see that this is placed on a piece of card here. So I've got a piece of card here. That could be just, from a cardboard box that something's been delivered in. And the main reason that is there is just to protect your table, which you've also hopefully got a cover on, a plastic cover. I've also got a range of household objects here, so let me have a look. I'll just move my camera light out of the way there. We have got things like lids, scrubbing brushes. What else have we got? Rollers as well, hair rollers. Scourers are great. They're really useful to use. The older ones obviously are preferable. I've just pulled these out of the cupboard, but if you've got old ones that you want to have a use for, it's a really good time to use them up. So here's one here that I have used before. I've also got a selection of acrylic paints. Okay, so they're useful if you have them. I've got some neon, I think these are fabric paints actually that I had in the cupboard, but you can get neon acrylics if you're a neon fan like I am. Up at the top end here, we have got some embroidery threads, some needles, and also some tailor's chalk here, which is useful for making marks on fabric before we sew. Paper plates. Got some paper plates here, got some pencils. Up at the top end here, we have got some paper doilies. So they're the kind of thing that people use to put under cakes on plates. So we've got those as well. And right over this end, we have got some acrylic fabric medium. Now, you don't actually need any fabric medium. It's just that I happen to have it here. But I will be telling you of a good way to make acrylic paints fast, if you like, whereby you don't need to use a medium, but we'll go over that in a minute. And I have got an iron over here as well. So I think that's about it. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I think it's probably time to get started. So what we'll need to start off with is a piece of white fabric. So I've got my piece. I'm just going to pop that over here on top of the cardboard. Okay, so white fabric's on there. And the next thing that we're going to need is a doily, a paper doily. So I've got various shaped ones here. I think I'm going to go for a circular one again. I keep getting drawn back to these, but you could use any shape really. So I'll try this one first and see how I get on. And then I might try a different one in a moment and see how we get on with that as well. Okay, so got that there on the table, and the next thing that I'm going to need is a paper plate. Okay, and the paper plate is simply to put the paint on. So if you've got an old piece of cardboard or you've got something else to hand that you think is more suitable, go for it. Use that instead, not a problem. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some acrylic paint. So I'm going to use black, really just for the purposes of this demo. It stands out well, so we're going to use that. I'm going to put a small amount on there. It's hard to get it back in the tube, so less is normally a good idea. And then you're reducing the likelihood of wasting any, really. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a scourer. It's one of these things, and I am going to work it into the paint. So I'll do that by dabbing it a few times. So we're effectively spreading the paint over the plate a little bit so it's dispersed. And if you sort of do a dabbing motion like this, what will happen is that the paint will soak into the sponge, but it should also leave enough on the surface for you to be able to print really well with it without it being too loaded. If you just dip the sponge in there and you have a big blob of paint and then you go straight onto this doily, which is what we're going to do, you'll just find that the paint bleeds through all the holes and it can get really quite messy. So you need to make sure that you spend a little bit of time doing some dabbing so that you've got the paint on here, but it's not too thick. Okay, and then what we need to do is we start dabbing over here. Now you will need to hold on to the doily with one hand while you do this. Okay, so you start to dab and you do that sort of really thoroughly. You need to make sure that you're covering the whole area. So I'm just going to do that now and then I'll show you what we end up with. Okay, so we've now covered the whole of the doily area using the sponge and dabbing over, and I'm now very carefully going to remove this and we will see what we have underneath. Lovely. Okay, so that's what we have left underneath. Now then, what you can do at this stage is you can say, that's great, I'm happy with that, I'm going to leave it as it is. Or you can experiment a little bit. So I'm just going to show you a few that I have made previous to this. So here is one of them, and obviously I've dabbed for a little longer here. You can see that it's darker on the edges. The definition is a little bit stronger. And here's another one that I've done where I've actually done a series of prints. Okay, so I've layered them, joined them up, put them next to each other, etc., to make a larger picture, if you like. So that's also an option. You can obviously try using other colours. You could overlay colours, you know, you could have another go placing another doily next to it and overlaying in a different colour. So those are all different things that you could try if you wish to. If not, if you're completely happy with that and you say, yeah, that's fine, I just want to do the one, that's fine as well. So you'll notice that on this one that I did here, that I've got some lettering on there. Mine says every cloud, so there's a saying, every cloud has a silver lining. And I was trying to think what I was going to write on here, and that phrase just came into my head, so that's why I decided to go with that. But you could write anything at all on yours. So it could be a saying or a phrase, or you could make it for somebody else, so it could have their name on it, or you could do Merry Christmas, Nadolig Llawen, anything at all that you like. Okay, so have a think about what you might like to put. You can find lots of good ideas on the internet, memes, that kind of thing as well, quotes, famous quotes, inspirational quotes. So there's lots of things that you could put on there. Now, to transfer the lettering onto here, because we're going to be sewing it on, but it's a good idea to have a clear idea of where you're going first. So you can use a pencil, or you can use something called tailor's chalk, which makes a mark. Let me just see if I can do this on here. I'll do it on the card and you can see. So tailor's chalk makes a mark like that. Or you can use a pencil and you just write on here whatever it is that you want to sew. Okay, so you write whatever it is that you want to. So I think I'm going to do Nadolig Llawen on here. I'll do that now, and then that can be stitched over. Now you can really go to town on the writing if you like. You can do it as curly as you like, or you could look for different fonts. There's all kinds of ways that you could do this. have lots of fun sort of coming up with different ways of writing it. Okay, so I'm just going to do this. So I'm going to get a little bit curly there, why not? A little bit curly on the L. So I'm going for Nadolig Llawen. You know, and you can have bits coming off it if you want, swirly bits, whatever takes your fancy really. Okay, so to embroider onto here, I have used sort of basic embroidery threads. I'll just show you what they look like now. So we've got some over here. So you can get these fairly cheaply. I've got a few different colours here, but really, you know, you could get away with 1 or 2 colours. You don't need to have all of those. And then what you can do, if you like, if you're no stranger to embroidery and it's something that you've done before, you could use a hoop. So you can get these in different sizes. This is a little bit big for this one that I've got here, but the idea with an embroidery hoop is that you sandwich whatever it is that you're sewing in between these 2 bits. You pop it in there and then put that bit back, and then you tighten it up, and it provides you with a flat surface, so the fabric is stretched over the hoop, and then it makes it a lot easier to sew. So that's something that you could use if you have one, or you could ask somebody else if they have one that you can borrow. Okay, and then you go to town with your embroidery. Now, when I embroidered this, I used these threads, and what I find, and this is the way that I was taught anyway, to be the most effective way of using embroidery threads, is if you get the end of the thread, and if you separate it, you'll actually see, if you look closely, that there are 6 separate threads that make up this piece, if you like. So you can split it into pieces, so 3 and 3, and then I use one of those for each piece that I embroider. That'll make sense in a minute because I'm going to show you. Okay, so I mentioned before about embroidery threads having 6 strands in total. So one of these bits is made up of 6 different strands, and I've separated that out into 3 and 3. And I do find that it's easier to sew with just one of these sets of 3 strands. So you take a long piece, cut it obviously, and then just sew with effectively with half of this piece here. There are times where I might want to use the whole thickness, but generally speaking, I do find it easier to separate these into 3 and 3. That's certainly what I was taught to do when I was younger, and I've found it to be helpful. Okay, so the stitches that I've done on here are really simple. We've got a chain stitch here. These are really nice for doing little flowers. And this is just a simple running stitch, except I've gone back on myself so that there aren't any gaps. So that's the way that most people are taught to sew, to do a running stitch. But normally a running stitch results in a stitch and then a gap where the thread is running underneath the fabric and then comes out again. But with this, I've just gone back on myself so that it's continuous. Okay, if you have a look on YouTube, there are loads and loads of YouTube videos about embroidery, some really, really good ones that'll show you how to do different stitches, or you can get a book from your local library. There's some really good resources around. Okay, so this is the finished piece that I have got here. It's quite a simple thing, and I could make that into anything. I could do something like that on a bag, on a pinafore. I could do a section of them, or a selection rather, so a range of them all together like this, and you know, to use for a cushion or something larger, which really makes me think, well, that's great, but what do I do if I want to wash whatever I've made? So ideally what you want to do is to make sure that this paint is fast, so it's not going to run when you wash it. And there are various ways of doing that, but the quickest, simplest way that I can show you to make sure that the paint stays in place while you wash it is by making it fast, and you would do that by setting it with heat. So if you have an iron, all you need to do is plug the iron in, put another piece of fabric over what you've made. Okay, so I'm going to pop it over here. Okay, let's get that one out of the way. So you just pop it over there, iron on, keep moving the iron. It's important that you don't sort of leave it to stay for long, so keep moving the iron, and you do that for sort of 3 to 5 minutes, and that will basically set the acrylic paint. Okay, so I have heard that another way of doing it is to put it in the dryer for half an hour. It's not a method I've personally tried, but that is possible. The other thing that you can do, I mentioned having some fabric medium earlier on, you'd mix that with the paint before you use it, and then you would still need to heat set it. Well, you certainly do with this bottle that I've got here. It says that you need to heat set it, but obviously follow the instructions on whatever you're using. Okay, so that is how you could set it. Now, before I finish, I think what I wanted to show you as well is that this can be just the start. So I'm going to show you a few examples of printing that I've done where I've really played around quite a lot using different things. So here's another doily one, and as you can see here, I've tried different things over the top. Yeah, it's a bit messy, but sometimes that's where we learn the interesting stuff and find out, you know, have ideas of other things that we can try. So this one here, I've obviously originally done it in a darker colour, and then I've overlaid other colours over the top and used some neon colours there. This is interesting. I've actually used, I think this was an old iron that I used for this, and these bits here have been created from things like this. So sponges, showed you these ones before, you know, the ones with the holes in, those bags that you get oranges in, and baby bells and things like that, they can be really good. Net fabric, net curtains, mesh. You can use things like hair rollers to roll over. These are great, you know, dish brushes. If you dip that into some paint and then put it over, you can create lots of amazing effects. Lids from jam jars, dip them into the paint and print. Okay, so I just really wanted to show you that to finish off with, to show you that there are lots of different things that you can do, and you could then very easily pick out areas here that you wished to embroider over. You could do something that's more abstract. So there aren't really any limitations in terms of what you can do. You can really go to town on this, you can really play around, and you can see where it takes you. So that's the end of our activity for today. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and I hope that it's inspired you to play, I guess, really, you know, to try new things out, to have a play around, to look at things differently. One thing I do know is that I've got a newfound respect for scourers, and for hair rollers and dish brushes and that kind of thing, as a result of doing this kind of work. I don't think I'll ever look at those in quite the same way again. So yeah, if you take anything away from this session, I would hope that it would encourage you to look at things in a different way and to think about alternative uses for them. Okay, so thank you very much, and I hope you have fun. Okay, thank you.